So when we last left this painting, I asked that the background dry. You can put as many glazes over that background as you want until the sunset has the hues that you want it to. Acrylic's really easy to correct that way. And if it has bled a little bit when you've thinned down the paint, that's not really going to affect the ink because the ink is going on solid black and it's going to cover that area anyway. That's why I asked you to roughen your subject in the foreground in pencil so that you didn't paint over the whole area. It's much easier to have planned out your painting ahead of time than to try and work on it over top of paint, because you can see clearly where we're going to block in using ink. And we're not going to, in this case, blend that ink with the paint. With watercolor, you might do it. There's different techniques to do it. With acrylic, though, you can use it on the same canvas, but you're not actually ever going to mix ink into your acrylic paint. A wider brush, the flat end, flat side, and that way you can use the tip and the edge to help you do a straight line or a curved line, following the contour of the subject that you're doing. So when you dip into your ink, make sure you wipe away the excess. Ink tends to run even more than watered down acrylic paint. So if it runs, have paper towel handy, wipe off the area of the acrylic painting you don't want it to be on, but hopefully you can control it a little bit more than that. So I've wiped away the excess. I'm taking it up to the edge of my subject matter. I can go over the orange a little bit where it's bled into the subject matter because my basic shape still needs to look like the subject matter, and I don't know what subject you've chosen for this situation. In this particular assignment, we are focusing on shape. We are focusing on a particular time of day at night so that you don't have to do any detailing on this India ink. It's just going to focus on the shape of a subject so that when you look at it and it's finished, it's going to be solid black or gray against the acrylic paint, and it will really set off the shape. So your shape is very important that you get that right. If you look at how quickly I can brush on India ink without worrying about the details too much. I mean, I'm taking my flat edge pretty slowly where I want it to start and stop. I use the tip of my brush when I paint. I don't paint with the flatness. You don't usually use a brush that way. Just drag it down with your ink when you load it, and you're going to need to reload the brush quite a lot. So it's just literally blocking it in. With any acrylic painting, there's a blocking in stage anyway. It's just normally with acrylic paint you would go back over an area. With the India ink in this case, the way we're using it in the context of this painting, it's just there to define that shape and nothing more. So you can see the horse has ears and a head now. You can see once this area is blocked in what we're looking for: the color, the shape, the contrast. So let's zoom in again on the zone I'm doing. I can switch brushes partway in between if I find I have a section like this where the thickness of the other brush isn't going to suit it. I'll switch to a script brush because this line needs to be a little bit thinner and a little more precise when I use the script brush, I'm going to bounce around like a cylinder almost, because of it being a ropier. And in the original sketch, I can see my pencil line has been painted over with the acrylic paint. I can still see a trace of it. So I'm going with my basic instincts as well as my original pencil guide. I can also make adjustments as I see fit. But basically, it's nice to use a script brush because it's loose and it's fluid and it will move in curves. And that's how you do a small area. Now let's focus on that rider right up here. He's lost some of his shape in the transition between sketching and painting, but we will reclaim that shape as we block in my ink. So again, I went back to a larger brush and I use the tip where I want the edge defined. I want a clean edge. I don't want any messiness. I don't want it to not be clean design, because we are focusing on the shape the way this assignment is set up, so it really does need some precision when you do your outline. You can take your time to do that part. If you're working from a photo, you can refer to a photo even at this stage after the sketch is on there and adjust it if your visual eye tells you to do that. Before I work down the horse, because that's a solid mass and I'm going to paint it as a solid form. But now that I'm in the center, I can work really rapidly and just pull in some broad brush strokes with my brush. Now I've got the top of the figure. With the rider sitting on the horse, his leg muscles and a lot of his body muscle is going to blend right into the horse. But when you see it in the end, it's not going to matter. You can also see right now that where the ink is starting to dry, it's turning a lighter black, the ink that's freshly placed on there. And if you want it really, really black, you may have to put on a few coats, but hopefully it's not going to help you to put excess ink on it as you go along, because it will just bleed if you try and do that. What I mean is it will run. This is what I mean. If your paint were too thin, it would run. Your ink will do the same thing. The other word for that is bleed, of course. So your bold lines are going to cover that orange, which is why I thought it would be great in an example to show you don't panic. You can correct a lot of inaccuracy in your top coat. So since the bold color use in the background and the mood is getting set with this ink, we are really getting accurate shape so that it stands out against that background. Now also notice I started an island in the background, so I can't forget to do that. I'm going to let this area dry, work on a different area, and come back to that area. So again, my paint has went over my original pencil mark, but that's okay because I can reclaim any area I want to right now. If you found you went over it and there's still some paint showing, just go over it again. You may need to have it dry a little bit before you do that. In some cases it won't run right away, but that's subjective, how you find it works for you. And it doesn't have to be very stiff like this. It could be, rocky, different looking, and that makes that area, it gives it some, I guess, depth when you're looking at this from a distance. So there's the part we blocked in, and there's the rock it's standing on. So I'm not going to neglect those details. The black ink has to go into this area now. So I'm just going to block in the whole area, and the actual hooves are going to blend into the rock just because we aren't focusing on details in this drawing. It's just a shape drawing. You will see some form of those hooves in that they're wider than the upper part of the leg, so you're going to notice that when it's done in full. But for the most part, the mass is blending in with other parts of the animal, not as you would typically necessarily do a piece with paint, because the black of India ink, you'll find, is a uniform, flat way of blocking in something. It isn't going to give you light and dark blacks necessarily. It's just going to accentuate form. So we keep going with it until the whole area is blocked in, something like this. And the other thing is maybe some type of sponge, something with texture like a sea sponge. And you'll see why in just a minute. So I'm going to take my script brush actually, so that I can start with just a really basic line, and it's really freehand. I haven't got the sketch of this in behind because it is so random. I'm just going to drag it and not think too hard about it, to be honest with you. And I want a couple of them. And the reason why I want it to be so freehand is that it will look a lot more natural. Now I want some areas to be thin lines and some thick, and I come back in with my brush to do that. Near the base it's generally thicker, so we add that thickness now. But as far as where branches come and go, it's very random, and we don't put too much emphasis unless it's a specific tree. We're just sort of randomly thinking it out. Now, the detail in a tree comes from how you sponge the part that would be branches and leaves. So what I've done is I've put some ink down, and I'm dipping my sponge in it right now. So I take that spongy area, I dab it on, I lift it off. I dab it on, I lift it off. We've got the entire painting done now. You can see the sunset, the water, the subject matter that's dark against the color. The India ink, there's